I'll just make sure everyone on Zoom knows who's in the meeting room with us. You've got Chrissy Tabaxi from Circuit Rider, and Rose Antaki from Goldridge, myself, and Chris Carlson from Snowland Trust. All right, sweet. And hi everyone in Zoom world, Jill, Jason, Lynn. All right, so at the beginning of every meeting, we go around and kind of give an update about what is happening. And I think we've talked about wanting to do, usually our updates are sort of like on what we have done, but we also want to include what you're looking forward to doing that's coming up for you, so that we kind of know what's on the horizon and what ways that people can, other members can support you and your work. So with that in mind, I was wondering, Lynn, would you like to get started for us?
Sure. I am in the Upper Mark West watershed, and just a couple of things about workshops we have coming up. On April 6th at Rancho Mark West, which is up on St. Helena Road, we have a new workshop. I see Eric. Hi, Eric. That's been put together by the Resilient Landscapes Coalition and Sonoma Ecology Center. It's a new format, so we're going beyond the defensible space. We'll do a short segment in the morning. It's from 9 to noon. There'll be an initial segment on defensible space and one on home hardening, and then we'll go beyond the 100 feet and talk about what people up here can be doing in their forests to make their forests healthier and safer. So that's April 6th from 9 to 12 at Rancho Mark West. We do want you to register. I don't know if there are spaces available. Eric, do you know?
I think it's full at this point. We have all 30 spots filled in.
Right. Well, so yeah.
But you know, anyone here obviously is welcome.
I think we can, yes, we can accommodate people in this group for sure. Another one, I'll give you a save the date. The flyer is not out yet, but we're doing a workshop. This is all part of the Upper Mark West Fire Safe Council and Friends of the Mark West Watershed. So we're doing a workshop on May 11th that will be on grazing. And last year we focused mainly on goats and sheep and getting people involved in grazing. This year, the workshop will be held at Pepperwood. So Michael Gologly will be talking about the results that they've seen from their cattle grazing pilot project at Pepperwood, as well as Bronte Edwards from Rainbow Farms Ranch will be talking about her primarily sheep operation, although she has some cattle, and she also has a meat operation as part of that in addition to grazing. Aaron Fairbrook will be here from Sonoma RCD talking about the new LandSmart grants and what they might include in the future. And who am I missing? And last but not least, of course, Stephanie Larson will be talking about kind of the who, what, where, when, and why of grazing. So that's May 11th from 9:30 to 1 at Pepperwood. And it will probably also be limited space. And so I'll send that flyer to you, Adriana, as soon as we have it ready. I think that's about it. We're all busy with burn piles up here. That's the season. We're building and burning as fast as we can.
Awesome, thanks, Lynn. That's great. All right, Chris, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Is that volume about right for everybody?
Getting nods.
Okay. Let's see, we're kind of in the process of gearing up for our next season of forest management. We have a grant from the State Coastal Conservancy that covers activities at our coast preserves and at our Knights Valley preserves. So we're busy creating safe boxes to put fire in, and then doing some focused oak health work on conifer removal, playing a little bit with girdling versus cutting down and piling, and maybe less intensive thinning before we do that first round of prescribed fire. So yeah, we're excited to have burning activities, Sonoma Valley, Knights Valley, and some big pile burning activities at the coast this fall.
Awesome. All right, great. I'm gonna put it over to Jason Mills.
Good morning, everybody. Happy spring. When I'm not enjoying wildflowers, I'm pursuing meaningful fuel reduction projects, and we have some exciting ones lined up this summer. So a mix of public and private lands, and really excited about those. Working with Lynn up on Calistoga Road with Fire Safe Sonoma, and now a pretty sizable HOA with some pretty significant beetle damage on some big Doug firs right in the heart of Santa Rosa. And then I'm continuing to advise on work. I've got an exciting training for Marshall's team up there in North County. He's going to have a bunch of resources, so I got an opportunity to help inform that crew on some ecological approaches to the work. And then today is my big broom day, so I'm going to be doing a broom talk for you guys, a little snapshot of a bigger discussion I'll be doing with Fire Safe Sonoma at 2 o'clock this afternoon. So lots of good things happening.
All right, great. And you're going to be presenting to us too, a shortened version of the broom management presentation.
I'll try
That's
to keep
awesome.
it short. Easier said than
I think we made the agenda spacious enough for you if you do your typical. Okay, great. And Christy, would you like to go next?
Sure, absolutely. Let's see if the owl will pick me up because I haven't, there we go. Hi, everyone. I'm Christy Troxley. I'm with Circuit Rider Community Services. And we do a whole host of different things in both the ecological realm and also social services. And part of how we marry the two is that we have a workforce development program for young people ages 16 to 30 who are interested in natural resources and land management. So we had a recent pile burn workshop that we did in conjunction with UCCE, Torrey Norville. And that was out in Occidental, and it was part of a forest health plan for a conservation easement there, part of phase 2. So we were excited to do that and have an opportunity for our crew and also the community as well to learn about how to do safe burn piles as part of one of the many tools for vegetation management. We also have applied for, as I know a lot of entities have as well, some workforce development funds through CAL FIRE. And we're also hoping to partner with some of the folks even here in this room and virtually. We've been working with Eric and some of the other folks at Sonoma Ecology Center to potentially create a program to train our crews on biochar and how that can be one of the many tools that's used in terms of vegetation management and managing that biomass after those treatment projects. So a lot of cool things in the works. Again, we're really focused on providing workforce development opportunities for young people. And glad to be here and hear about everything that's going on.
Great, thanks, Christy.
Yeah.
All right, how about Fred next?
Hi there. Very little report. I see Raymond is on the conversation. I'm still looking for a firewood project to complete up on Mill Creek, and still very involved with Wildlands Conservancy, but I'll just let it go for there. Okay, next.
Okay, thanks. All right, well, I will go. So a couple of things from the RCB world. We have, I guess one thing that's really on my mind right now is that there's a forest health block grant available from the State Coastal Conservancy. And they approached the North Coast collaboration of RCBs to put in a proposal. So that includes, I think it's a total of like 11 RCBs up and down the coast, with Marin being the southernmost, extending out to Napa, including Lake, Mendocino, Trinity, Shasta, Humboldt, et cetera, up the coast. So it's a really large group, but yeah, we're gonna be putting in a proposal for 6 million, which sounds like a huge amount, but they want it to contain a lot of implementation. So you know how fast implementation dollars go, and it's a 5-year grant. So we're gonna have a kind of a healthy balance between, I think it's gonna be like 50% implementation, and the rest of it will be more of our like project development, workforce development, supporting our local nonprofits and their efforts to kind of tool up and do what they can to get, us well positioned for future implementation. So it's, I'm really excited about the opportunity. I also know that it's just gonna be a little bit at the end of the day for every county. But I'm hopeful that we will be able to, that our cities will be able to partner with each of you on some of that work in the future. I also have held in my mind the need for the junior colleges, workforce development program and how they need funding right now. And so I'm trying to put in some money for them in there, not knowing quite yet if they actually can accept a grant from the RCDs. Because I know that they've said that they need to talk to their dean about how they can accept money, but I would love to get some amount in there for them. So that's kind of part of it. And that's due really soon, so we're scrambling to get it together. And then what else? We will, I think the RCDs, it's not set in stone yet, but we're working with CAL FIRE on a shaded fuel break that they would like to install in Monterey. So it's a, it kind of goes like parallel to the coast along Mendocino Redwoods, the Redwood Regional Park, and then Sweetwater Springs. So there's, we're gonna be doing CEQA for that project for them this year. So that's really exciting, getting a new shaded fuel break prepared for Monterey. And let's see, the other thing I wanted to mention, but I think I'll leave it for Rose, is about our soliciting contractors for our rebate project. So I'll just leave it at that. And Rose, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm Rose. I work at Goldbridge RCD with Adriana, and I'm working on administration and outreach for the State for West County Defensible Space project that includes rebates for people to do defensible space work. And for that, we need to hire a contractor. So we're putting together a list of interested local contractors who have defensible space expertise. And we've sent out kind of the first round or a few rounds of forms to folks. So we have the list started, but it's always open to add more. And if you have any recommendations, my email is just rose@goldridgercd.org. So we're looking for more contractors to add to the list, and that, and that project also has a free chipping element. So there are 4 communities in West County that can get free chipping by request. And then the other things I'm working on with Adriana and Kim are just the ongoing resilient forest and watershed workshop series.
Okay, thank you. All right, how about Eric?
Hello all, Eric from Sonoma Ecology Center. Obviously know many of you. It has been a wild, quick March, kind of honing in on the finishing of the guide, which will be resources for, mostly people who are working out on the land, who are generally new to it, but should also help lift the baseline of work in the county towards a more ecological lens. With that being said, now it's time to start putting it into action. So super excited to get out on the land. We're doing trainings, we're doing workshops. We'll be at Mark West on April 6th through the Resilient Landscapes Coalition. This weekend, I hope to see a few of you. I know I'll for sure see Jason because he's presenting at the Fair Safe Sonoma Leadership Wildfire Mitigation Leadership Summit. And otherwise, it's as Adriana was saying, kind of trying to get all that money. So a lot of proposals. We're working with Circuit Rider and other like CCMB, et cetera, to do some biochar. We just sent that in maybe a couple weeks ago. Raymond, who's on the chat, can maybe say a little bit more about that. It's, it's been a whirlwind, but very excited, and I'll kind of stop there. Oh, one other thing. So went out with Chris yesterday to the new Vernal Pools property that they have, and we'll be doing a little bit of work out there. It's a beautiful property, so looking forward to the implementation as well.
Oh, super cool. Okay, great. And how about Chen?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good, because it's funny, I'm not seeing myself on the screen here at all. Anyway, the Western Hills Fire Safe Council in Ukiah, CAL FIRE would like to do a training for any of our members and other fire safe councils in Mendocino County who are interested in learning to become inspectors for home hardening. And instead of giving us a date or two, they want to have a list of people first. So our next Fire Safe Council is next week, and I'll be talking with people about that. And that's kind of it for now. I'm really glad that we have had a lot of rains, although that also means we've got a lot of thatch. So there's going to be some veg trimming coming up.
Yeah, thanks, Jean. All right, Jill.
Good morning. Jill Butler. I represent Balala River Watershed Council. And there's a few projects kind of inching along up in that watershed, and everybody's writing management plans. So Sonoma RCD's plan, they are frantically pulling together a rough draft, and some of you are on the coalition that's provided some input for that, and there'll be a draft for you to see soon. The Redwood Coast Land Conservancy is doing a study and writing a plan for the estuary, which is basically the mouth of the river up to the first, the second bridge. And they'll put out a management plan, and that will address conditions in the estuary and recommendations for improving fisheries habitat. And water quality is inching along even slower, but they're going to do something about updating the total maximum daily load standards. So anyways, more, you will all hear more in the future about all of the above, and there'll be meetings and opportunities to come. And that's
Awesome.
kind of what's
Thanks, Jill.
going on.
Great. Thanks for sharing. Steve?
Hi, you guys. Nice to be back. I was recently down in the Santa Cruz, Santa Clara area, just getting updated on all the fun pathogens and fun things that are moving into potentially into our area from there. So we've got the most concerning of those is the invasive shot hole borer. It's got a it loves riparian plants, and it's pretty good at killing trees. It moves first and foremost on box elder and sycamore. And you get tens of thousands of beetles every time one of those gets infested, and then those move out from there to hit everything nearby. The good news is it doesn't like to move far, so it sort of marches slowly along, but it's and it can be managed by cutting out these what they call accelerator trees, these trees that they can reproduce tens of thousands on, but it doesn't look good for, say, box elder, willow, sycamore, and a few other trees that make up a good-sized chunk of our riparian populations. That includes, unfortunately, valley oak and coast live oak to a lesser extent. And it seems to prefer well-hydrated, healthy trees, which is also kind of a bummer. So although in valley oak, it can't overcome the host defenses until they get pretty stressed. So that with the Mediterranean oak borer, which is going on up north of, well, actually right in your backyards, leaves a little bit to be concerned about. The black fig fly has moved into Santa Cruz and Santa Clara as well, and that is a problem for California fig industry, which doesn't necessarily fall into what we are worried about as the Sonoma County Forest Conservation Working Group, except that a lot of backyard figs are going to be potentially infested too. It doesn't kill the trees, it just ruins the fruit and it attacks them when they're very young. We can talk more about that in the future if you care, but I imagine most people don't. And that's what I have that's exciting for now. So, hooray.
Thanks. Well, great. Okay, so just as a reminder to everyone, if you have upcoming events, please send them to me or Rose afterwards so we can get them on our calendar. And if you have, if you want to share any write-ups about what you shared verbally today, I think that would be really great too, since it's, I'm listening as well as I can, but I also love to see just like, you know, just a few lines written about what grants you're applying for, what partnerships you're entering into, what, you know, what things are coming up. So if you have time to do that, that would be great. All right. Well, we were super prompt and like quick with our updates. So we actually have plenty of time, Jason, for your presentation, which is great. So take it away whenever you want to. Screen share away.
Unmute myself. Okay. Looks good. You guys see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, looking good.
Looks great.
All right. Well, here we go. So, subject of broom, always ripe for conversation, especially this time of year while it's out flowering in abundance. It's been a nuisance over the years. I got going on it on Mount Tam over 20 years ago. I've seen a lot of successes and failures along the way. In the end, my goal is just to see the resources most effectively used through developing a sound strategic approach for management of this. And I'm going to be featuring some of the projects I did with the Sonoma Ecology Center, some of the projects I did with WRA, and that now I'm continuing on with my own contracting outfit, EcoLogiCal Solutions. And to just get started here, the brooms, minimize my screen. I can't believe how many times I hear it's Scotch broom out there, and then I get out there and it's French broom, right? I don't know why that is. I think maybe Scotch broom has been here longer. I know it plagues the Pacific Northwest and a lot of logging sites are just completely covered with Scotch broom. Here on the central coast of California, we have way more French broom than Scotch broom. You can tell they're in different genera with Genista and Cytisus, but they're all related. They're all peas. They're all from the Mediterranean. What's interesting is looking at their kind of physiology. The French broom has smaller flowers, more compact, with many, many seed pods that are short and produce a profusion of seeds. And it grows very rapidly, but it has a very shallow taproot, which lends itself to manual control. Now the Scotch broom, oh, I did Scotch broom twice. Whoops, good thing I got to fix that. That one on the right is actually Portuguese broom. They're co-geners there, but they're easy to tell from French broom because the flower is probably 3 times the size and the pod is about 3 times the size. Scotch broom can turn like maroon at times. And in the end, I perceive Scotch broom as being much less of a threat because it spreads slower. It tends to stay put. I mean, it's a menace, but it doesn't sprawl the way French broom sprawls. And the difference in treatment between them is that the Scotch broom and the Portuguese broom have a much more substantial taproot. So you can't pull them by hand. You really need a weed wrench if you're going to get in there and tend to them. Now, what we've seen, you know, here in Sonoma County is rapid eruptions of broom coming in post-fire. It's so crazy it comes in thick as a lawn. And essentially that's because a mature plant can produce up to 5,000 seeds. And these seeds are highly viable, so you get a pretty high success rate on those seeds. And it's interesting because when you look at the trajectory of most invasive species, right, if you could nip them in the bud and get to them early, they won't continue to spread and require more resources for control. What we have here is like a typical invasion curve where you can tell, it exponentially grows, requires exponential resource for control and containment. So the earlier you can address it, the better. And what we have had in Sonoma are these post-fire populations that erupt that kind of reset the clock on treatment and give us another chance to get in there and get them before they can go to seed. And that's really important for broom control. And why is this an issue? Well, most invasive species form these dense monocultures, which dramatically increase overall biomass. In the case of the brooms, they're especially dangerous because they're perennial woody plants that form these dense thickets and dramatically increase ladder fuel. If you look at that compared to, a natural oak woodland profile, it's very different. We don't have standing ladder fuels, 10 feet tall, continuous through the understory. This is like an intact oak woodland up on Sonoma Mountain at Jack London. You can see the gap between the perennial grasses and the limbs on the bottom. And that just kind of sets it up as like a natural shaded fuel break. This is kind of what we're all working towards, is having this space from ground cover to canopy to lend itself to low severity burns. And when you do have this natural state, it turns out the oak woodlands are, I would say, very resilient to fire. We had one spot fire happen right by my house. It ran right through, didn't even get into the crown or canopy of the oak woodland, burned out. And in the end, they think it actually helps to fortify the trees and provide more health for the oaks. They think fire suppression has helped lead to increased rates of sudden oak death because they're saying the trees are starved of calcium to fortify their bark, which makes them more susceptible to Phytophthora infestation. So maybe bringing in burns to the oak woodlands will actually help to fortify the trees. But, if wherever there's French broom, that's going to be not possible. So if we see, this is more typical to a ladder fuel situation on a monoculture of French broom. And here, this is actually coming in post-fire in Santa Rosa, super thick. You can see some of the oaks got roasted. Some of them are trying to hang in there. But I'm kind of predicting this as a epidemic on the central coast of California with increased fire frequency and lack of resources going to invasive control. These populations are continuing to expand. And I think we're going to slowly see a loss of oak woodlands over time. And we're going to see a shift to these dramatic invasive sprawling populations. And it's going to wipe out biodiversity. It's going to change vegetation and fire regimes. We lose the overstory when it gets roasted. We lose the understory to all the perennial forbs that are trying to survive under there. So it's a big deal. You look at the impact to the trees, it's kind of all over the place. A lot of the hardwoods tend to stump sprout or have epicormic growth after fire. If you increase that fire severity, then it's more of a burned tree than a scorched tree. And once that cambium is damaged, it's not coming back. So the more fuel that you have around our mature hardwoods, the more damage that it's going to do to them. Here's an example of post-fire broom erupting on Sonoma Creek there. You can kind of see the wilted broom right after the 2017 fires. That's kind of how it looks. And, people think, well, fire will reduce overall biomass, but unfortunately the introduced invasive species are also fire adapted. And so these disturbance events tend to reinforce their seed banks, and you have actually increased fuels following fire. One technique you can do to deal with all this broom immediately after a disturbance event is bust out the propane torch. I couldn't find any good pictures, so for some reason this lady's low torching equisetum, but it is very effective on a young Genista seedlings. You have to do it at the optimal time. So right now in the spring, when the ground is wet enough to not carry fire, and you can roast those young seedlings before they've got woody, before they get woody and they're still vegetative and herbaceous, and just quickly roast them with a propane torch. It's, you know, easier said than done. Lugging the propane tank around isn't super fun. Working in areas that are, you know, close to structures, probably not advisable. And then, you know, you're going to need to bring along all the fire suppression equipment just in case something should get away. But really, if you do it during the wet spring, it is an effective way to get all those seedlings. The issue I have with this is that you're just roasting the top. So it's good to suppress the seedling growth. But my whole perspective after doing this for so many years is to try to actually address the seed bank itself. And so if you're just kind of burning the crust of the top layer, you're not getting at all of that stored seed bank below. And that has a lot to do with how long that population has been there, right? The residence time of those broom populations, many of which have been here for around 100 years. So the seed bank goes deep. One thing that I highly advise is to never mow French broom. Having had to go in and pull broom after it's mowed, it essentially doubles the root volume and makes it much harder to pull with a weed wrench. And I've seen it grow back, I want to say 90% of the time. A mow does not kill broom, unfortunately. It's out of sight, out of mind for a little bit. It might stop it from putting out more seeds, but it's going to grow back. And that's exactly what happened here in Santa Rosa. You guys have probably all seen this site in Fountain Grove. Post-fire, they paid big money to mow the entire hillside. And then it came back thick as a lawn. They then have tried to spray it. And you need total coverage to actually kill a broom plant with a spray. And it's really hard to do because it has so many leaflets. It's really hard to get all of that. And I've seen broom covered, you know, 85% with chemical. That 15% that didn't get coverage is just enough to keep it hanging on. And then what's the point of spreading all that chemical if you're not actually going to get a kill in the end? And here's another kind of tragic story. Homeowner wanting to do all the right things after the fires, paid big money to have landscape crews come in and not only mow it all, but haul it all away. And here it is after sinking $20,000 into that effort, coming back thicker, denser, and harder to pull. So, you know, not only is a real detriment to the environment, but also it's very hard on people who expend resources wanting to get something accomplished. And then when it isn't done right, it sets us all back. So, you know, thinking about disposal is actually a really big issue for this plant too. Whenever you're looking at disposing of vegetation, it's like twice the labor, twice the budgets. So what I like to do on this is come in this time of year, March and April, manually pull it all, and then just spread it on the floor of the forest. It'll decompose pretty quick. It doesn't have big wood and it rots generally pretty fast. You can save a lot of money that way. If you're right by structures, then you probably do want to dispose of it. But if you're off in the woodlands, you know, a foot of broom will decompose down pretty quick, especially when the fungus gets into it. Another thing I like to really advise on is to address source populations. So, you know, having expended a lot of energy downstream, it's a complete waste if it's all just going to get reseeded in from above. And I'm seeing this happen on a lot of recent fuel reduction projects. This one is up on Cavedale Road, one of my favorite places in the valley, has a lot of incredible plant diversity. They got funded to do a roadside fuel break. They went in and mowed all the broom, did the woody biomass with the limbing work. And then now this is, you know, 2 years later, broom coming in thicker than it was before. In places it wasn't before, looking, you know, 8 feet tall, ready to, you know, have an even bigger fuel load. So again, just wasted resources. Another travesty about these roadside populations is, broom seed tends to move hydraulically. So what it does is it gets in the tire tracks, spreads down these roads and starts new populations along the top of the roads. And then it fans down into wild areas and eventually just completely overtakes intact ecosystems that become really hard to access. So this is, again, a really good use of resources, getting these roadside populations before they spread. Now, how do we get into it? There's a lot of ways to approach Broom. It has a lot to do with the scale that we're dealing with. I worked with some homeowners in Glen Ellen to address source populations that were infesting Sonoma Creek in an area called Wind Creek. There we united with the fire marshal, Sarah Gibson. This shot of Sarah on the right shows a pretty substantial source population of the broom there. It's about 10 feet tall, and it's just like a wall of vegetation that's just going to dump so much seed into that entire watershed. So, we're working with the landowners here. We're getting access. We're using topographic maps. We're trying to figure out what the right approach is to actually contain and treat the broom. Here I did a pretty large scale broom mapping effort out in Point Reyes. This is for Scotch broom, but when you're dealing with 200 acres, this I think was a cumulative 30 some odd acre Scotch broom infestation out there. The way I like to map those substantial populations is using a tablet and a GIS program called Field Collector, I think it is. And what I do is I do something called throwing points, where you used to have to go out with a Trimble unit and actually walk around each of the populations. Now we can pull it up on the tablet, get a look at the landscape, and just with the ease of your finger, polygon off all these stands. And so here I did it by density. We were able to pull together the estimate to treat this population over years. And it's going to be a substantial project. We're still trying to get funded. Now here on another private parcel, what I like to do is kind of break it all up, right? So what I do is I have been using LiDAR maps to get a good perspective on the terrain. So this map on the left that looks like a moonscape is very easy to see what's going on with the lay of the land and the terrain. And that's really important when you're taking on broom, because you want to start from the top and drive it down and push it out of the watershed. And you want to attack it by drainage. So you're not just working in one area, you're looking at, okay, all this broom seed's going to work its way down this drainage, the other one's going this way. So you can break it up into management units, which makes it much more able to treat. And you can scale these units according to what your budgets and resources are. So, breaking it up to meet the tangible aspects of the project are really important, and we can adjust that as we have the resources to do so. Here's another one on a big private parcel I did down in Marin, and on this one, what we did was we kind of broke it up along the access road there. We had a drainage to the right, a drainage to the left, and then I wanted in year one to get all the stuff up top. So we handled the yellow polygon in year one, and then we were to come back and do the red polygon the following year, then back to the yellow, then back to the red, and repeat. And that's something I call the hopscotch approach. And that's made possible by the fact that broom grows roughly about 2 feet per year. So when you do the original pull, it won't be able to grow tall enough to reproduce. So you have a 2-year gap between pull increments in order to get it before it goes to seed. And that's the name of the game. So we did the yellow polygon, then that grows up a foot, doesn't make any seed. Then we hit the red polygon, take all that out, and we go back to the yellow when it's 4 feet high and ready to make seeds. So that's the beauty of the hopscotch approach. It's tough because it means you're going to need probably 6 years with most of the work in the first 4. But that last pull, that third pull, populations decrease dramatically, and you've got about 10% of what you had originally. So it's a 6-year process. but it's really 4 years of heavy lifting and then 2 years to kind of round it out. And then there's always spot maintenance at the end. So yeah, here's what I was kind of talking about, the watershed scale approach, considering going hopscotch by tributary, 3 cycles of polls every 2 years, and a 6-year continuous effort. Now, what sort of tools do you have in the toolbox? I love pulling broom because it's manual. You know, you can get out there and just do it with your hands, but these weed wrenches help. A lot of times you can work with kids and volunteers and just pluck them out really easy. The root goes 1 to 3 inches on most plants. But when they get big and they're established, it really helps to have these weed wrenches. And there's a lot of different models out there. That orange one in the middle is the original weed wrench. Those are kind of hard to find as they're phased out. The other models are Canadian, and the white one is called the Polar Bear. And then on either side on the orange, there are the extractigators. And all of these are quite heavy to drag around the forest. And so sometimes I like to use the kid size, just for, you know, making it a little easier on the team to get out there. But it's nice to have one big one. When you hit the big ones you can't pull out, it's nice to have one granddaddy weed wrench to go after it. And then here, a picture, Adriana, of our Forest Working Group conference. The fellow came with a handmade shovel broom puller. And, you know, I'm sure that works great too. I like trench shovels a lot, but anything that's going to get at that root. And when you pull it, you're flushing the seed bank. That's the most important thing. You're flushing it out of there, and that's what you want to do. And you're also preserving all the native species, which I didn't include in this presentation, but I will in the one at 2 o'clock today. Here's just some action shots from the fields. This was a really dense one, Chris, over right by your neighbor's property there, the Oak Hill Farm. We went at that pretty heavy. When I'm working with my crew, we probably on average tackle about a ½ acre of dense broom a day. So it's about half of what we do with fuels. With fuels, we shoot to do an acre. With dense broom, we're happy with shooting for a ½ acre per day. This is that project I showed with the yellow and red polygons doing the roadside treatments there. I think that took us about a week to do about a mile of roadside. And then, you know, that's my crew work, but man, is it effective to get volunteers going in this stuff. I mean, when I was with Sonoma Ecology Center, we had all these great Earth Day volunteer polls. It's right around this time of year. And we had volunteer groups come out after the fire, and we hit it pretty hard. This was right after the fire in 2018 in the Sonoma Developmental Center habitat corridor. And then here we came in and to do it again 2 years later in 2020. This was a group of bartenders from San Francisco. It was a fun bunch. But they didn't get in the wild very much, so they were out of their element. But once they got into it, they were really enjoying it, and they made a big impact. And you know, I talk a lot about broom. I've seen a lot of broom go well and not so well, and I'm always spinning my wheels, talking all this stuff up. But unless you have data to rely on, you know, it's just somebody's, you know, opinion. So on this one, I started running transects through the poll site in 2018. And after those 2 poll events, we knocked it down. I mean, the fire did the first one for us, but this is the same site. It's pretty much gone. Now when I drive by, I see, you know, one's popping up, and it's actually starting to try to get back in along the roadside. So I need to reach out to SEC and see if they still have funding to go after that stuff. Because it's just a shame if it comes back after you finally controlled it, you know? And that gets into, you know, should you put something else in there after you control it, and holistic restoration and all that, which again, I'll save for the talk later today. And that's what I've got for you. So yeah, 2 o'clock, I'll be doing an expanded version of this for Fire Safe Sonoma's speaker series. And I'm always a resource for everybody, just to do what I can to help. And this is my team, and we're going to be getting going in April. So prime time for broom control projects. And yeah, I wish everybody the best with them. And let me know if you have any questions.
Awesome, thanks. Thanks, Jason. I see there are a couple questions in the chat, but yeah, maybe people can just shout out their questions.
So Jason, I was asking, when you're estimating a half an acre per day, with how large a crew is that?
My crew, on average, it's generally about 5 to 8 people. Yeah. But it has everything to do with the morale of the crew. And when you're doing it for like weeks on end, you do see production start to drop off. So, that's another beauty of the hopscotch approach. I think, 4 weeks is a solid work window for a typical broom crew to hit their mark. I think once you go past 4 weeks, you do have some drop off. And scaling the crew to the size of the infestation is pretty critical too.
And if a landowner were paying for this, about what would it cost to have a crew of 5 to 8 people per day?
That varies on, how those crews are being compensated. I think I like to ballpark it at 3,000 to 5,000 per day, all said and done with travel and materials. And, it's not easy paying people a fair wage these days to do this work. And we need to take care of our workers that are doing it. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
It looks like Fred and Stephen have comments or questions in the chat. Do you guys want to just shout those out for everyone? All right, I'll go ahead. I'll do it for him. So Fred says, I'm invaded by Genista broom buster moth. Seems
Yeah.
good now, but do you know of any negative consequences? I see it eats false indigo and lupine as well, very resistant to predation.
And did that come from Fred or Steven? Seems like a Steven question.
It was a Fred question.
That was a Fred question. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I've been seeing moth damage out there. So I did reach out to some old contacts with USDA, and they said that there is a moth in our area that is doing foliar damage to the broom. It unfortunately isn't killing it, right? But it's doing some damage to it. So I think it might decrease its reproductive capacity, but you're not going to get a kill from it. And there have been no official biocontrols out on it yet. I heard rumors of a potential mite in Oregon, but I think that might have been for a Scotch broom.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it knocks it back pretty significantly. I also do a little top cutting on it, and it seems to prevent it from flowering for an extra year. Though I am concerned about it jumping over to other species, and Stephen gave me a good answer in the chat.
Right, you'd think, all these legumes, they're kind of connected,
Yeah. Jason, I have a question for you. I see broom oftentimes on really steep hills.
Oh,
And
yeah.
since the best treatment is mechanical, like people actually going out and pulling it, how do you do that on really steep hills?
It's really tough. And what the key is to get it before it goes down those grades, and it's interesting because broom is a serious menace. Because unlike most invasive species, it can move into multiple ecosystems. It can overtake grasslands kind of slowly, loves the oak understory, but it will also go into chaparral. And so when I see it just starting in steep chaparral areas, that's when I like to go get it. A lot of times I get pushback on that. Oh, it's just a little population. We need to go after the big stuff. But the problem is, broom as a legume and a nitrogen fixer, it fortifies its own existence by pumping the soil full of fertilizer. So essentially, like it moves slow when it's in the rocky chaparral, but once it starts establishing some richer soils, then it starts to boom, and then it'll start seeding down those steep faces, and then you get these kind of ribbons of broom going down the steep faces, and it can be really tough to control. It's in some ways it's actually nice because you have the hill to work with, so you kind of have gravity on your side with the weed wrench. So I've had success pulling it on steep faces, but that's where you're looking at the difference between probably hiring out a contractor towards, doing it yourself, as you look at all these scales of risk. And hired contractors, we can use rappelling equipment. We could consider doing a cut and paint on some, isolated populations out there. So there's ways that we can get at remote, tricky populations. It's all about, if you're seeing something on a really tough to get area, well, where did it source from? Let's address it from the source and then start pushing it out.
Yeah, thanks. Any other questions? I haven't, oh, Fred, go ahead.
Question, what about mulching? Have you tried that?
Mulching? Yeah, I wonder on mulching. I mean, the broom seed is pretty sizable. It's a pretty hardy seed. So I don't know if it would actually like rot. And the studies show that it can persist for many, many years. But then if that's the case, then why am I driving broom out in 6 years, right? So I think that seed bank, when flushed, is not so long-lived. But if it's hiding under there, it'll eventually reveal itself with earth movement and such. And so you could probably suppress it with that, but then you're going to have to keep an eye on it for maybe a longer amount of time, right? And that's the same deal with the propane torching. It's like it's effective at suppressing it, but then you're probably looking at more like 10, 20 years of treatments before you really get a handle on it, right?
Yeah, I guess I have a question about that too. So the propane torching or like broadcast burning, I know it's fire adapted, but could you not just like keep flushing it with fire until it's exhausted itself?
It's an interesting concept, the idea of consistently running fire through broom infestations. I think the verdict is still out. I have my concerns with it in that I believe it would probably end up impacting a lot of the species that live underneath the broom. When I'm out pulling broom, there's actually an incredible diversity of native perennial forbs hanging on under the broom, along with young tree seedlings. And that's why I love pulling the broom manually, because you don't even have to plant all that stuff. It's there trying to hang on and subsist. So I just wonder if you were to increase the fire frequency there and run fire through more rapidly, if it would hamper the development of the natives reestablishing, right? But I think I wonder if you got to a population that just has so much dense biomass, if that would save you on the budgets to just burn it all out and then start with all the new seedlings. But then you're looking at a pretty dangerous fire situation, igniting just all that standing ladder fuel. So it's tricky business. I I'm a little I'm more on the manual conventional approach over fire for broom control at this point. We'll see what happens in the coming years ahead, but um yeah, I just worry about a woody perennial plant like that and running fire through it, the amount of heat that it'll generate and its impact on surrounding vegetation.
So I'm not a weed guy, but my limited understanding of this is that you're exactly right. When you bring the fire return interval down, you lose all your woody vegetation and it all goes to grassland. And you lose a bunch of the fire following forbs if you're not really careful too, because they often need a longer fire return interval for some reason. And yeah, I should just shut up at this point, but that's consistent with the research and papers I've read.
Yeah, it's great because the fleshy forbs under there, the perennial forbs, they're holding water. through the fire season. All those irises and rushes and sedges, and along with native legumes like the lupins, all the forbs out there. They're kind of like, they don't pose a fuel threat, and they are the understory. They're holding all those soils in place. They're providing all those resources for wildlife. They took, forever to evolve to suit their particular environments. And I also think they suppress invasion. So, the more disturbance, the more open land you have, the more prone it is for more infestations, right?
Yeah, and then Jason, I mean, I think the other thing that you were saying too is if you don't remove the root, the disturbance actually can just cause it to expand its root system maybe too, so then that could be an issue with just burning it from the top.
Yeah, I would imagine that would happen because this thing has a will to survive. So even if you roast the cambium, if it's holding energy in the root mass, it'll probably resprout like a shrubby stump sprouter. And from doing the work on Mount Tam all those years ago, they've had broom for so many years. They've been routinely mowing broom, I would say, for 40 years. And I get into, trying to pull some of these populations, and the root mass is as big as a football, right? Compared to a 1 year broom like this, it starts swelling up, and then there's no way you could ever get it with a reed wrench. And so you're either mechanically ripping it out with an excavator or spraying it with a chemical. So yeah, the repeated mows are really tough. Some people do it and they just chalk it off as maintenance. Oh, yeah, we'll just mow that broom again. And I have heard random success stories like Devin up in Pepperwood. He said he mowed in the late spring and it was able to actually kill some of the broom. And so maybe in these hotter environments in the Mayakama, it can get roasted and drought stressed, but it's, I haven't seen too much of that. I've seen a lot of broom come back after mowing.
Okay. Oh my gosh. How do you guys feel about broom?
It's pretty. It's fun to pull. You can make a big difference with just these two guys right here. Just go out and, I don't know, it's very satisfying to look back on what you can do in a day with broom, Yeah, it's a people-oriented invasive plant to control. So I kind of love it for that reason.
There's a trail that I walk most mornings in Oakland, and it's just like lined with broom. And I've been collecting it for bouquets for my house because I was like, well, what else am I gonna,
Oh yeah,
it's here. It's pretty right now.
and you're stopping seed set too.
Yeah,
it's a win-win. Yeah.
But the other thing that really gets me is when I see it for sale at like Home Depot or like other nurseries. I'm like, I can't believe people are still selling this. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how the state hasn't intervened on that one yet.
For a lot of invasive species like English ivy, that's the case. And I was one of the dads on my kids' basketball team is from New Zealand, and he was telling me how insane it is to him that we sell non-native invasive species at our nursery, because in New Zealand they take very good care of their wildlands, and he was saying that the nurseries only carry indigenous native species. So it's just interesting culturally. I guess we're hanging on to some of our European roots there, bringing in these Mediterranean plants, but they sure are a nuisance. And if you think about the money that it takes to control these things on a statewide level, there should be a law against it, And I think I love the idea of people starting to steward the lands they recreate in, right? There's some pushback on that. We need professionals to properly ID everything. But something like broom is, ubiquitous or what have you. And I feel like whenever I pull it on a trail, I leave it in the middle of the trail so other people will at least see it and go, I wonder why they did that. Maybe, if we all on every hike we took pulled a little broom, we just might get ahead of the trajectory.
Jason, I'm curious, you mentioned in some situations considering replanting after pulling. And I noticed on the Land Smart invasive species, the Broom grant opportunity that just went out, one of the questions was, would landowners be willing or interested? So what would you replant with?
That's a great question. So I got really excited about when I heard this. A colleague was saying way back in the 80s when they started pulling French broom right by the Golden Gate Bridge, they were trying to save the mission blue butterfly habitat there. And its host plant, I think, is the silver lupin, Lupinus albifrons. And so they had seeds of Lupinus albifrons for the restoration effort. And what they started doing was direct seeding it into broom stands after they pulled them. And what it ended up doing is type converting it over to a native lupin stand where there was once broom. And if you look at all of these invasive species, they're essentially like symptomatic responses to land disturbance. And they're all actually providing some sort of ecological niche role for the community. So to think we can strip it and have it stay gone is not really a informed technique. It's really looking at it as a symptom. And so now we need to replace and heal that function of that ecosystem. So I like to look at related plants or congeners, or at least by family. And there are so many great native legumes out there. I'm going to talk about them more at 2 o'clock, but I've run into some really random ones out there, like Rupertia, the tea, and it doesn't get taller than 3 inches, forms a rhizomatous mat, and stays green through the entire summer. And then you have all the Lupinus succulentus and all these other cool native legumes. And they're suited for it. They'll pick right up on those nitrogen fixed soils and do very well in them. And I have seen success with that with invasive thistles, where we removed bull thistle, native cobweb thistle, then established in the wake of treatment. And so there seems to be something there about, that holistic principle. And that's something I really like to think about, but it's tough because the invasive plant people are just so focused on, let's get the bad guy, let's eradicate the target. But really we have to open up our lenses and then understand all of the ecosystem and functionality of all the species composition to try to restore it properly, And one thing on a totally other side note that I forgot to mention that I think is really important is tracking the work, right? So when you're doing all the mapping work, you have your choice of all these different programs to use. One thing that I really advocate for is CalFlora, because CalFlora is an open database that's available for all of the public to see, unless you want it private, and then you can do that also. But I love it as a shared platform. So I can go into the maps, look there, see, hey, has anybody tried to control broom here before? Where have the efforts gone? Can I pick up off that effort? I should go reach out to this person. And so when I'm taking on the projects, I really try to take the time to document where I've done the work and provide that information to the general public and land managers. Let's see.
One thing we noticed in one area of broom that we pulled a few years ago is that the sweet peas that were also in that area, this is a riparian area, that the sweet peas took over. I think they're also not native, but they are not woody and they're pretty hardy and have replaced the broom.
Yeah, and we have a lot of native peas too, right? So that giant invasive sweet pea, there's a lot of little woodland lathyrus's and cool little native peas. I'll have to dig to find the species, but I was doing a fuel reduction project on Saddle Mountain, and I got in on one of the hillsides, and there was this incredible legume I'd never seen before, 3 feet tall, completely thick, but completely herbaceous. So just holding a ton of water. If you were to run fire through there, it would really drop the heat of the fire and slow it down. So even the native legumes that get pretty robust are much less of a fire threat because they're not quite as woody as the brooms and such. Okay, got any more of a drill you to death on Broom? If you guys want to go out and pull some Broom or?
Well,
Should we-
Jason, I guess I wanted to just add to what I had said before was, I was talking about how it converts to grassland. If you've got Broom in a grassland, which he said is a pretty hard thing for Broom to take over, and yeah, I get it. But if you got Broom in a grassland, maybe that fire return idea would be great anyway. I mean, I would worry
Yeah.
about if you had like cheatgrass or something in there that would really love to have a lot of fire, but if you didn't have that, maybe it would work.
Yeah, and that would be much more conducive to prescribe fire out in an open grassland like that without the canopy to deal with. One of the worst Broom infestations I ever saw was in the Carmel Valley, and there was about 2 football fields of it perched right on top of this hillside that was then dumping seed down both watersheds. And when I saw it, I took over as land manager there. I said, okay, that's number one. Let's get after that one. And then I was going through the historical photo records and I found images of that hillside with no Broom. And it turned out it was once full of coyote bush and it was coast prairie. And so they took big equipment out there to mow the coyote bush to increase the coast prairie, and the equipment was full of broom seed. So they planted the worst infestation on the nature preserve. So contaminated equipment is another major sore spot for it. And I think that's what did the infestations on Cavedale Road and a lot of the other roadside populations that we're seeing kind of sprout up and emerge where they weren't before. It's kind of tragic.
Oh. Well, thanks, Jason. That was a really great presentation, and I'm sorry we couldn't see the whole thing. If you have your like PowerPoint file from your 2 o'clock, like the full one that you want to share with us, I think that would be awesome, especially with that list of kind of the co-gen or co-genus species that you would recommend me planting with, or I think that'd be great.
Yeah, be happy
Okay,
to.
cool.
Can I
Awesome.
add one more thing? Up in Ukiah, there had been a shaded fuel break in the early 2000s. And then about 6 years ago, CAL FIRE came through to renew that shaded fuel break, but it became an unshaded fuel break and they took out the trees and huge amounts of Scotch broom. By the time we were getting after them on it, they said they no longer had CEQA, so they couldn't do anything about it. And up behind my house, it's just terrible in several different places now. Yeah, so we're gonna get a shaded fuel break. Make sure it's still shaded.
Yeah, and fuel reduction projects that wipe out habitat and increase fuels are a failure. And we need to start owning up to that, And Gene, one thing I did find out, those oaks we were looking at around your house, I think they're 2-horned gall wasp, not sods on there.
Could you say that again?
The 2-horned gall wasp seems to be hitting the live oaks especially hard right now, and it matches with the symptoms of your leaves.
Is there a way?
Jason, I'm gonna second that. I sent some samples to a forest pathologist and it was 2-horned gall wasp here, Santa Cruz County, a bunch of different places around the state.
So is that-
That we're seeing on that live oak.
Will that?
It's a natural pest. There's no need to do anything about it.
Okay.
It'll get itself under balance.
Thank you.
Makes food for birds too. So this is a good thing. We just have to put up with the foliar damage for a little bit.
Okay.
But I think it's cyclical, so I think it'll work its way out.
Mhm. Okay.
Oh, Lynn, you're on mute.
Could you describe what that symptom looks like, what you saw in the foliage?
Anybody, I would describe it as kind of like a tissue discoloration that tends to look like dead tissues within the leaf. So there's still green chlorophyll in it, but there's kind of veins of death and brown decay.
I'm seeing that too.
So the way so you need to look at the undersides of the leaves to do this. So the 2-horned gall wasp, the reason it's called a 2-horned gall wasp is that the galls are croissant shaped. So they have two little horns sticking out of the side. Now, the difficulty with diagnosis here is that the galls detach, but they are made on the mostly on the lateral vein, sometimes the mid vein of the leaf. And when the gall forms, it cuts off the water to the distal portions of the leaf. So you'll see browning beyond that portion of the leaf. And if you're lucky, you'll see the gall wasp there. It'll be a greenish crescent, which fades to a brownish color as it matures, but then it drops off and it just leaves a tiny black scar where the gall had been on that lateral or mid vein. So that's how you'll look at the undersides of the leaves and be able to figure out, oh, this is or was two-horned gall wasp. And here we go. So you can see these pictures. So the green turning to the brown, those little crescent-shaped galls, they're a little pudgier than that. And then you can see where the leaves have dropped off, the galls have dropped off, the little black veins, and everywhere beyond the vein typically turns brown. So there you go.
Thank you.
Yeah, hopefully we're not mowing down too many live oaks, thinking it's sudden oak death out there.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be doing that anyway, simply because it doesn't move from oak to oak to oak. So mowing down oaks doesn't do you any good in managing that.
Thanks, Stephen.
I feel like maybe since there's a lot of interest in oak health, it would be good to have a talk at some point about like, what are we seeing with oaks, invasive species or pathogens, issues with, kind of updates on sod. I would love to hear a panel about that. I don't know if you guys would like that too.
It's a really good idea. Just getting the word out on like trying to concentrate the work to the hot summer months when you're working in like disease infested areas would curb a lot of damage. So that seems like a great idea.
Yeah, and Mediterranean oak borer is kind of new, right? So it's like maybe sharing more about that. Okay. All right. I want to mention, by the way, if you couldn't tell, we are here at the Ag and Open Space District office where you're all welcome to come and meet with us. And we brought donuts for you all. So this will make your mouth water. I'm trying to get it to go in the camera. All you have to do is just come and see us here. So yeah, I remember last year people saying that they really like the idea of meeting in person. So that's why we're here. So please come. I know it was really easy for Christy and Chris because your offices are so close by. Not everyone's office is that close. But I think it's still nice to have everyone together. It's what we used to do. It's how our meetings used to be. So yeah, if you can, when you can, it's here for you. So all right. Okay, so the next thing on the agenda is I'm going to give a quick presentation on a funding opportunity that I just wanted you all to know about. I won't spend like a ton of time on it. I think I had 20 minutes on the agenda, but I shouldn't need that much time. So it's about the North Coast Resource Partnership. So the North Coast Resource Partnership is a really great nonprofit. They cover the North Coast, including Sonoma County is their southernmost county, and they go all the way up to the Oregon border. They do a lot of like watershed health, forest health, and partnerships with tribes. They have a block grant from CAL FIRE for their forest health grant program. So I think most of us are pretty familiar with the forest health grant program. It's meant to do forest health activities on large parcels of land or large areas. 800 acres is their minimum. It's supposed to help them get to their goal of treating 1 million acres a year. So the North Coast has taken on a block grant for CAL FIRE, kind of saying like, hey, I mean, I don't know exactly the history of this, but I think what it is that they want to help CAL FIRE disperse these funds. So they're like, we will help the state, the North Coast area, develop projects that are a good fit for the forest health grant. And then they will do the work of like doing competitive applications and dispersing those funds. So the opportunity that is available right now is if you have an idea about an application of a project that you'd like to propose, but you need some help getting it developed to the point where it is a fully fleshed out project. NCRP has some funding to help you do that project development. And so going back into the details, the partnership has 10 million. It's meant to be a pilot. It's kind of their way of just seeing like, how well does this work for the NCRP to do this on behalf of CAL FIRE. I think it's a 5-year grant. And just as a recap, these are the forest health categories that they're working in: forest fuels reduction, prescribed fire, pest management, reforestation, and biomass utilization. To decide on which projects are high priority, NCRP has a prioritization and like selection methodology that uses adaptive planning prioritization framework. And then they also have developed this regional forest health priority area map. And it uses weighted priorities of burn severity, mechanical treatment feasibility, fire probability, housing density, predicted flame length, and tree mortality. And it's actually a really cool resource that I want us to look at in a minute. So if you're interested, the ways to participate, so applicants who are interested in submitting their project, they can, so say you're an applicant who already knows exactly what you want to do, you can apply for the Forest Health Grant, and they think that they'll have that application open this summer. So you can just apply to them more or less like you would apply to CAL FIRE. But if you're someone who has an idea that's not really fleshed out yet and you need some help developing it, you can apply to get technical assistance. And the kinds of technical assistance available are, let me see if I have that in there. I don't think it's listed here, but it's basically like mapping, project feasibility, creating a project budget. We, can help with CEQA and permitting, site visits, pretty much any kind of help that you would need to take your project from just an idea into like a fully developed proposal. And if you need that kind of help, you can apply on a rolling basis, and they'd like you to submit your application by May 1st. You'll be paired with a technical assistance provider, and the RCDs in every county in the North Coast are qualified service providers. But there are also other service providers. You can look at their list listed here, and it goes by county. And I was hoping maybe Judy would be here because Coast Ridge Community Forest has received project development assistance, I think twice from them, and I think it helped her get a really big forest health grant submitted. So it's working. So let's see what else. Oh, the other goals. So I said it's a pilot. So they're just trying to see if this will work for NCRP to play this role. And it also has this connection with the Regional Forest and Fire Capacity Program, which you may have heard of, which is the Department of Conservation's program. So it's kind of nice, it's bringing those two things together. And NCRP is kind of like acting as the actor for both of those things. And then lastly, the pilot's intended to evaluate opportunities for NCRP to partner with CAL FIRE and kind of take this opportunity further. So I guess I just wanted to look at, this is a story map that NCRP put together for this project. And you can find it on their website. That's their logo, NCRP CAL FIRE Forest Health Pilot Regional Assessment. So this explains how they came up with their assessment for project priorities. It's actually a really interesting map to use. I won't go through all of it, but just getting down to the kind of the logic model and the different map layers is really cool. So the model inputs look at each of these one at a time and then all together. So individually, the first one is burn severity. So looking at areas that have been burned or that are unburned. Those are high, have the potential for high burn severity. And then places that have been moderately or lowly burned are have a lower rating for that input. It's kind of hard to see. I'm gonna see if I can show you Sonoma County. Nope. Well, let's see, maybe I can pan on here. Yeah, there you go. Okay. See if it'll work for all of them. So you can see that the high severity rating for our county is in places where it hasn't burned. And then we've got mechanical treatment feasibility. I thought this was really useful because it looks at these different inputs. So if there is or isn't woody vegetation, so if there's no woody vegetation, obviously it gets a 0. If it has woody vegetation, but it is really steep, then it gets a value 1. If it's wilderness, work's not going to happen there, or not as easily. So it gets a rating of 1. If it's riparian, it gets a rating of just 2. And if it's far from a road access, it gets a rating of 3. But if it isn't steep, if it's not wilderness, if it's not riparian, if it's close to a road, then it gets a high mechanical treatment rating, which is that red color. So just interesting to see where that is in our county. We got a good amount of it, and the next input is fire probability. So I guess this is just how likely it is to burn. Oops. And housing density, we know where that is. But I guess it's also just kind of interesting to see where outside of the valley is housing really high. In the Guerneville area. Yeah, and in the Eastern Mountains. Flame length, so these are long flame lengths, which I think Broom, tall Broom, would bump that up. Interesting. I would feel like there would be more of it on this map, but tree mortality, so areas where we've got like a lot of standing, like dead tan oak. For example, looks like our coastline is pretty impacted. And then finally combining inputs, so looking at all those together, you get their kind of master map, which shows them where their highest priorities are to treat. So if you happen to have a project that's within this zone, then that's great. You probably will get funded. And there's still a lot of, even putting all those factors together, we still have a lot of red in our county. And then, this is just a really cool resource. You can go, poke through the rest of it on your own time. And I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, just make sure to get in contact before May, and we'll be able to help. So
Adriana, did you say that these projects are looking at 800 acres and more? Is that what you said?
well, that's the CAL FIRE Forest Health grant goal, but I think for this, it can be a little less than 800. They just kind of want that to be your goal. If you have 500, I think they're still interested and could even help you to maybe add on more. And those acres don't have to be contiguous. They just have to be related. So, that's something.
Okay.
Could I ask a follow-up question? So this pilot project they have money for technical assistance to help develop. Is the pilot project is also going to fund implementation of those things?
Yeah, I think the 10 million goes to implementation as well. Yeah.
And the 10 million, that's an 800-acre project, or each sub-project that people apply to should be a large one? It's not a small project, good for small projects this round.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think 10 million is their total grant, which it's funny because I think in CAL FIRE's Forest Health Grant, they make individual awards of like 7 million, I think like a million is pretty common for an individual award up to, I think I remember seeing like 7 million. So 10 million is not gonna go super far with implementation, I guess, but your question was about smaller projects? Or?
I guess I'm thinking of whether it's even for this under conservation easement landowners that don't have 500-acre properties, but have 200-acre properties that are working under the umbrella of the NRCP. That would maybe make more sense.
Yeah, if you want to put multiple smaller properties together, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think they'd be interested in hearing about any of it. If you wanted to reach out, they can tell you more about what's what they're interested in. Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I wish I knew more about it. But I think, so part of the reason for this is that they do have a lot of money, they need to get out the door, and not as many people have been applying as they thought, so that they're trying to boost their ability to reach out to people and collect projects, which is why they're having the RCDs help them with that. They just really want to hear about projects, so if you've got anything, I'm sure they'd be interested. And we can help you get connected. Right. Okay, great, so that's that, and then, I wanted to bring up the next thing, which is our working group strategic plan. So the strategic plan, I think in past years, we've kind of taken one approach, which is like going chapter by chapter through our strategic plan and having everyone work on it. But I didn't want to do anything quite so intense this year. I just kind of wanted to get a feeling from our members how they use and why they use the forest working group and how we can do more for you all. So in the agenda I had sent out, there's a link to a survey that you can take. I'll pull it up real quick so everyone can see it. It's gonna take me a second. All right, so yeah, this survey is pretty short. It shouldn't take very long. You can provide your name and email if you want, or you can submit this anonymously. First question is, why do you participate in the forest working group? If you're new, what attracted you? If you left, why did you leave? What could be improved about the forest working group? So that really could be anything. And I'm very open to any and all suggestions. What would you like to see us do in the next 12 months? To help direct our work. And then would you like assistance with the forestry project? There's a longer intake form that you can fill out to give more specific input about that. I just linked it there. And then questions about field trips. Would you attend a weekend field trip? Would you attend a weekday field trip? And then this is a question from Fred. He says he wants to have more picnics this year. So where are the best forest picnic sites in Sonoma County? I know you guys know of at least one each, so that would be fun. And it could be like a picnic site that a large group can go to, or even just a small group that, you know, people can take themselves to independently. That's the first part of the survey. And then the second part is, I guess it won't let me go to it because I haven't filled it out, but basically it's just about your own accomplishments. So I wanted to report out to our funders what we've all kind of done on our own and as a working group. And so there's some just really easy fill out form sections about what kinds of things you did in 2023. So if you want to talk about like projects that you put together, or proposals that you wrote, or like a new partnership that you developed with a strategic partner, things like that. I think that's all really interesting, and you don't have to spend very long writing about it. Just a little something is helpful, just to kind of get a snapshot of what everyone's been working on this past year, 2023. So please go ahead and fill out the survey when you have a chance after the meeting. But for our conversation today, I thought we would just have kind of an open discussion about what kind of work that you all would like to see the working group do this year, and maybe not just the rest of 2024, but into 2025 as well. When I talked to our steering committee, they said that they wanted to have more brown bag presentations, more field trips, which I totally agree. That would be really fun. I think the only thing for me is that I need help coordinating those. So if anyone wants to volunteer and say, hey, come on out to my preserve and I'll show you, a whole slew of different forest issues, we can talk about them, walk under the trees and look at them, that would be awesome. Or if you want to show off the work that your crew has done, and we can go and see it from the roadside or something like that, would be fun too. We also have the suggestions that we work more with the Farm Bureau, or at least have like an event where we interface with them. And Brent had a great idea of taking them to one of the picnic sites and doing like a barbecue or something, just getting everyone out there so we can open up a conversation about how, you know, what issues they're having with managing their forest land, because a lot of farmers do have a lot of forest land. And yeah, so really we were talking a lot about getting outside. But are there any other things that you guys would like to see the working group do this year differently than we have been doing?
I guess we'll find out when people fill out the survey.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I guess this is sort of like a similar question kind of, but are there forestry issues that we should be talking about that we're not talking about, that you think we should spend more time on, or that you wish we could make a space for a presentation about?
Well, at the risk of being very self-serving, I think we should get somebody in to talk about invasive shot hole borer that really knows this stuff really well. And it wouldn't hurt to get an update on what's happening with the Mediterranean oak borer. What I see for the future for this group in terms of those is that both pests require proper disposal to keep us from spreading it in tree operations. And so my idea, and I haven't yet broached this with the powers that be, but my idea is that we need to start working on getting yards where people can take infested material, and the infested material will be properly stored, and people will not end up stacking things like a bunch of cords of wood on the side of the road with no sign on it or anything, and people coming by, picking it up and driving it up to Mendocino County or something. Because all these things spread best when people move them. And so we need to have a plan in place, because Mediterranean oak borer and invasive shot hole borer. So those are the things on my radar screen that I would love to see us do something about, just because no action is probably the worst option.
Yeah, thank you.
Be interested in hearing more about successful timber sales that people are doing for forest health reasons, rather, I guess, timber harvest operations that aren't just post-fire salvage. I would love to hear more about how people are doing that and where the successes are.
Yeah, is that something that you're thinking about doing? That
We
you're
are
interested in?
toying with that idea of doing a dog fir harvest over in Knights Valley. But certainly won't pay for itself, and I'd be interested to hear other people's experience with that.
Okay.
And it would help to have a couple other landowners be part of it to help it pencil out too.
Nice. Okay. It's not happening so much here, but Tamara is hosting a bunch of meetings, and so public meetings, and also just kind of like internal working group meetings for her woody debris utilization project that's happening, which I think is super interesting and it does kind of like touch on all of these questions. It's like, how do we do, you know, what wood is merchantable versus what's waste, and how do we kind of like get each of those into the right stream? How do we keep infested wood out of that, you know, wood products kind of marketplace that they're creating, so we're not accidentally giving people stools that have Mediterranean oak borer in it. You know, it's actually a really, really cool conversation that she's hosting. So I would suggest that anyone who's interested get plugged into that project. It's the Sonoma County Woody Feedstock Utilization Pilot Project. And And I think we have one of her events on our events calendar, so if you want to look at that, you can just go to sonomaforests.org and look at our events calendar, and you'll see the first public stakeholders meeting for that group, and I recommend everyone to go to that to learn more about it and to give your thoughts. Any other kind of issues that, you'd like to learn more about or hear about or share about? Need support with, anything like that?
Well, I had a question. I put it in the chat, but I'll ask since Steve brought it up. So last year, there was a large valley oak on my property that had been stressed for a long time, was gradually dying and died. We could see that there was some borer damage, but nobody could identify what kind or whether that was the cause of the death. So my question is, we cut it, we tarped it, and it's been sitting on the ground for 9 months. Is there a point at which that wood is safe to cut up and move?
That's a great question. And I think the answer is yes. There is a point where it is safe to cut up and move. And I'm pretty sure that has a lot to do with exactly how long the beetle lifespan is. And if they can't make it out from inside there, the beetles, depending upon what kind of beetle it is, so invasive shot hole borers will reinfest the same wood over and over and over again. So I think we would need to have a proper ID. Fortunately, I don't want to bore you guys to tears with all this stuff, but the short answer is fortunately, we can now send stuff off. They've figured out what fungi correspond to what beetles, so they don't need a beetle anymore to be able to figure it out. They can simply culture the fungi out of the wood and then use that to figure out what the beetle species would have been. And I don't know if it's known how long invasive shot hole borer, since it has a predilection for reinfesting its own wood, can last. So I can't answer that question positive. I have my suspicions, but I don't want to mess everything up by making guesses that people think mean something.
So how would one go about having that culture done and the pest identified?
I think, Lynn, you would take a sample of the infested wood that had beetle galleries in it, and the beetle galleries will be really pretty obvious because they'll be thin, the size of like a half millimeter or a millimeter across, depending upon the exact species involved, but they'll be black on the inside. If you split the wood and you find them, they'll be really clear. And you can just take that and send it into like a Keith Escalin at the Escalin lab at UC Davis. If you want to bring it into your cooperative extension office, we should be able to help you. Michael Jones is the contact in Sonoma for the Mediterranean oak borer. He can also probably handle, he works with a Keith already, so testing for invasive shot hole borer should not be a problem. Or you can bring it down to Marin. I can do the same thing.
Well, actually, Michael was the person who looked at it and said, tarp it, leave it here. So I can go back to him and ask him to look at this further.
Right. So he should be able to help with that. If he can't, call me and we can figure something out.
Thank you. We're trying to do the right thing. We don't always know what that is.
Right. Well, everybody is. And the right thing is really, we need to have, so this is really belongs in a thing, but it turns out that chipping kills 98% of the beetles right there, just doing the chipping. Now, if you're dealing with a sycamore that's got 40,000 beetles in it, 98% doesn't start looking like such a good ratio because it doesn't take many beetles to infect a new tree. So, so it's not great control just by itself. But if we had a yard that had a giant tub grinder in it and we could just dump this stuff in and have it chipped to 3 inches, we'd be fine. If we can chip it to 1, we get rid of 99.8%, and that's even better. But 1 inch is pretty hard to achieve with a giant tub grinder.
Well, this was a giant tree, so moving it is not easy.
Right, and that's one of the things we're concerned about. then if you have to bury it on site, yeah. But that's all stuff that we should get somebody who really knows this stuff to talk about.
Thank you.
Okay, well, that would be a great conversation to have in the future. So are there any recommendations of speakers?
Well, we should try and bring Mike Jones in. He's a good speaker. Keith Escalin might be an option. John Kabashima probably knows more about this than anybody I know of. He's also an excellent speaker. He's funny and he likes to tease his audience. And he's the guy that we just had up from San Jose to speak about it. I'm pretty sure he'd be willing to come up, but we'd have to, John's right in our backyard. Our travel expenses would be nil. Sorry, Mike Jones is right in our backyard. John Kabashima is in San Diego. We'd probably have to buy him a plane ticket at the very least. And put him up in a hotel.
Well, could he just do a Zoom meeting maybe?
He probably could. So that's an option we can ask him. I can ask him.
Awesome, that'd be great. Okay, yeah, I'll work with you, Stephen, to set that up.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Well, if there are no other ideas about things that we want to talk about at this time, that's fine. Just send them to me when you do think of them or put them into the survey. We're getting together our kind of agenda for the year, and we're gonna do kind of a blend of presentations on Zoom and then outings out into the field. So whatever you guys would like to. And we can also, I mean, it would be great to have one of these speakers talk about infestation in the field, right? So we can go and see a site that, you know, one of us knows is gonna have a lot of interesting things to look at, and we can talk about forest health, pathogens, pests, disease, all that kind of stuff. Okay, cool. So then the next thing I wanted to bring up was what we do have on the calendar so far. And there's a lot of interesting events and ways to get out. Let's see, just make this a little bigger. And I believe all or most of these are on our events calendar online. So Land Paths is doing a ton of burn pile events right now. So if you want to go and visit any of these properties, or if you want to go learn about burn piling, or if you just want to like go and stretch your body and work, they're going to do a burn pile event at Open Song, at Riddle Preserve, at the Grove of Old Trees. And there's gonna be like several of those, so all throughout the spring, so those look fun. There's also a Resilient Landscapes Coalition workshop on April 6th. Eric or anyone from SEC, do you guys want to share a little bit about what to expect with that event?
Yeah, certainly. As Lynn was speaking to earlier, we're going to do 30 minutes. Fire Safe Sonoma is going to speak about hardening homes. 30 minutes. Mimi Enright from UC Master Gardeners is going to speak about defensible space. And then the rest of the time, which is 2 hours, I'm going to do a presentation based on the guide content that Caitlin Cornwall and I put together. And then we'll walk the land and look at how that can be implemented, places where things have been done well, places where there's opportunities. Right at Rancho Mark West. So very much looking forward to, especially the walk around.
Nice. Sweet. There is gonna, so just further down the list, April 18th, everything you need to know about the wildfire fuel mapper. It's something that a tool we've talked about a few times in these meetings, but they're, I think this is gonna be presented by Pepperwood. And yeah, I think it's been a year or so since we saw the last iteration of it, so it'll be cool to see what they've come up with next. I think they've expanded it beyond Sonoma County into into Napa and Marin maybe. And they've done some improvements, so that would be cool. May 3rd, Sun Oak Death Blitz at the Grove of the Old Trees. I really want to go to this because I can always learn more about Sun Oak Death, and the Grove of the Old Trees is just a beautiful spot. So it'll be fun. And then this is one I really wanted to share about is California Tree School. So this is UCCE's one-day event where they go through a really robust agenda of topics. It actually looks very similar to the conference agenda that we put on, even though it has even more content in it. I think all by UC researchers, or maybe mostly presentations by UC researchers. And it's really cool. It's a lot of the basics and beyond. So they're going to talk about different tools that you use in your forestry practice, how to do monitoring, how to use prescribed fire, how to identify sudden oak death, how to do a forest inventory. There's going to be a bunch of things. So if you feel like that's something that you'd be interested in, or if someone you know is like the right learning level for that or experience level for that, I highly recommend it. It's up in Hopland at their research center, which is a beautiful property. And then they're gonna be doing more of these throughout the year. I think this is the one that's gonna be closest to us.
Adriana, the registration is, at least last week, was not open. They were having some issues, and I asked Kim, and so at least as of last week, Kim said they're still working on it and the registration is not up yet.
Oh, okay. So maybe it's still completely unfilled, which would be good
It's
for us.
unfilled. Yeah. I think it is.
All right. Thanks for letting me know. Yeah, and I think that's all we have, but we'll keep adding to it as you guys send us your events, so, yeah, and then we just have our monthly meetings, at 11 o'clock at the Open Space District on the third Thursday. Sweet. Thanks everyone for your time, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for hosting, Adriana. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good one.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks. Bye.